Hello, I'm Sora Luxon, and this is Magic Lesson number 63, Goetia Questions Answered. And I've got my iced green tea here, in case I talk too long, my voice gets scratchy. And if you hear noises in the background, that's my puppy dog. She's chewing on her jerky treat. So what is the Goetia? This is the message I received. What is the Goetia, and should I have it or be using it? Is it a good or bad thing? The order I've joined says I should stay away from it, which of course makes me want to get a copy of it even more. Innocent, unevolved ego, how loud you are. Because that's what an adept hears. I was told not to do something, now I really want to. You haven't quite balanced and dissolved that automatic reactionary disposition yet. You're still functioning from a position of predetermined emotional bias responses. It takes time. You'll release it eventually if you do the work to do so, if that's your path. And then you'll look back at this DM I just read, the one you just wrote me, much later when you're a proficient, empowered, attuned adept who determines their own will, and you'll laugh at the innocent, very self-limiting mindset, method of communication, and way of interacting with the world that you used to be determined by. If I can't have it, I want it more, right? Screams ego endlessly into the abyss. Meanwhile, Buddha sits comfortably cross-legged in the same void, blessing the nothing, which is the all, which is what ego is so terrified of, and maybe tosses a yam mudra at ego once in a while. Moving on. So first things first, the Lesser Key of Solomon is divided into 5 books. And that's what you're asking about here, because one of those books, one of those 5, is the Ars Goetia. A little bit of confusion there sometimes for people. So it's 5 books and it's gathered into one larger text known as the Lesser Key of Solomon. But when people refer to Goetic magic, it doesn't just mean magic derived from that one book, the Ars Goetia, but instead the whole of Goetic magics and their applications, how they're used. Goetia literally means sorcery, witchcraft, conjuration, incantator. As it's derived, we think amongst notable sources from the word, I don't know how to pronounce this, Goetia, it would be T-aya, Goetia, which means loosely, again, to charm or juggle, which is a word that refers to sorcery. That's what the label used to be. For anyone who used incantations to create or while creating movement with the voice, sometimes known as wailers. Ars in Latin is art, right? Ars, art. And so Ars Goetia, the art of sorcery. Although Goetia itself is a very old misspelling, as you'll see it in print if you decide to buy a copy of, say, the Lesser Key of Solomon, you'll see that the way it's spelled isn't correct to its original formatting. And I've heard strange rumors from people about how somehow Goetia means wailing or howling. It doesn't. It means sorcerer. It means the art of sorcery. I think what's going on there is because sorcerers were sometimes known as wailers. Maybe there's some confusion there for people. Or the Greek word geth, right? The G-E-H-V, I believe, or G-V-E-H, gveh. Maybe they're drawing some connotation there because that means howling. But this is from the Latin, it's not from Greek, and that's a misinterpretation, a misunderstanding if you're thinking it's coming from the Greek word gveh. Anyway, beyond all of that, what you need most to know here is that the Goetia relates directly to the history, mythology, and legacy. Notice I say legacy, not legend, because much of this work, his work, King Solomon, I'm going to explain that, is very alive and kicking today. So it's not a legend, it's legacy, it's living legacy. of the ruler King Solomon. So you can begin your research on the Goetia there, and at least some comprehensive undertaking of searching out who and what King Solomon was and is, what he is and means to you, everything around that entire topic. Because in short, among other things, he is still known among those in the know as the greatest magician of all time, an esoteric conjuration expert of such esteem. Huge portions of all Western occult magic derive directly from him, from the Goetic work. The guy was possibly the wisest person in the history of mankind, right? A Hermes Trismegistus of his own. No, that's really, that's part of what Masonic societies today still encapsulate in sacred trust to maintain and protect the symbolism of the works and wisdom of this ruler, King Solomon. So, pretty important guy, probably someone you should respect. So now you're thinking, well, how can a system of magic in this book that guy wrote, that he created, be bad? Because that is what the Goetia is. It's on the writings of very highly advanced system of Solomonic magics. So why would you be warned away from it? Why do people tell me not to read it? Why does an ovate or adept or formally recognized thelemite or expert theurgist or alchemist tell neophytes and apprentices at the beginning to avoid this work, the Goetia? Why does almost everyone who's already a practitioner or member of a coven, lodge, circle, fraternal order tell the newly received to stay the heck away from this grimoire? Don't touch it, don't read it, don't try to do it, just flat out don't mess with this book. It's incredibly dangerous and you will regret it. These are the sorts of things neophytes hear. So why do initiates of high magic say that, almost as a knee-jerk reflex to anyone who asks about the Goetia? If Solomon was such an amazing guy, what's with all the fear and negativity towards this book? Why shouldn't I play with these interesting sigils and names pertaining thereto that are inside of it? Well, mostly it's because the Goetia deals with such an incredibly advanced form of magics that it is dangerous to just about everyone. Solomon was the guy who managed to corral 72 Sumerian entities, fractures or facets, 72 pieces of the psyche possibly, into building a physical temple for him. We're talking about energetic beings so old, so ancient. They were around before the Talmudic traditions began recognizing and recording them as either demon or angel. In Judaism, Christianity, none of that was even around. We're talking about ancient Mesopotamian energy. Because before those traditions, before the Talmudic tradition broke entities into groups of demons and angels, they weren't even defined that way. They were simply the jinn. And no, not genies, which are the much later anglicized format, and not jinn with a D, D-G-I-N-N with a D, that's the Romanized version, which also came later. But the origin jinn. Again, origin jinn, G-I-N-N. Pre-Anglo, pre-Rome, pre-Islamic, pre-Arabian even, entities of ancient Sumer. This word was around before the word assassin ever came into play as a codified group. Not just some banishable apparition either, or hastily hexed servitor that you've created, or trainable familiar. These are powerful, intelligent spirits of unknown rank and classification brought forward at the beginning, neither necessarily good or bad, but individuals in their own right, individual intelligences capable of choosing and leaning towards either the good, the light, if you define it that way, or dark, bad planes, positive or negative polarity choices and actions. They were the antithesis, the equal and balancing half to the creation of the fitra, which, if you go back far enough in Muslim texts, was thought to be the original state of purity that all humans are born with. have innately encapsulated within them that state of innocence that we were given, a natural disposition towards all that is good and light after the fall, that we're part of that fracture. So already with an ever-ready reach to every man at birth, right? That's what mankind was given. And that, in its creation, required its own balancing, equal, and separate influence. We know in magic, everything balances. So these were intelligences created at the origin that have no given nature, no automatic internal disposition, recognition, or nearness to what we might call the divine evolution by access to that divine light, right? They don't have that. These are entities that exist external to or beyond, if you will, both the negative or positive poles, energetic influences. They aren't caught in it. The opposite and equal force to the power and dynamism of man's realized creation. Universal law, after all, right? All things equal. To all things there is a balance. If mankind is given a waking consciousness bound to the material plane of our perceptions, manifested physical motivations, physical bodies, that we know to be only a minute, like a tenth or 0.000th% of what our unconscious mind is and has and is capable of and has access to, then what do we think a level of consciousness unconstrained by those material laws, unconstrained by that material plane, and fully aware of itself is like? Yeah, exactly. Way, way up the food chain or way, way down it, depending on your perspective, whether you're talking about an angelic entity or a jinn or demonic entity, perhaps, right, of the specific being that you're dealing with. But no matter what, a much vaster, more intelligent, broader, deeper, primal, or ascended, right, evolved in either direction, again, depending on the personal optics in play, form of consciousness than we humans have. Guaranteed, no matter what. Now that sounds pretty intense, right? It sounds pretty bad that these jinn, whether they're good or bad, these intelligences so unconstrained by the boundaries of spiritual law that we can't even imagine how they operate or what could possibly motivate them. They very much are not like us. And you still hear the whisper of that danger, that warning today, even in the corrupted and convoluted retellings of what they were. Because every genie story does explain that a genie will interfere with humans if forced to, can take on different forms, animal forms. These things are always done at a great price if you ask them for things, that they can do just about anything because they are really that powerful. And that they are always smarter than their enslaver, right? They will always outwit, outstrategize, outthink whoever calls upon them. And the word genius comes from the root word jinn. And some of these were the 72 energetic forces of individualized intelligence that Solomon supposedly managed to dominate, constrain in a brass vessel, and then use for his own ends. And that is what the Goetia is. It's the book of that process. That's the extremely highly advanced, dangerous level of magic we're talking about here. Forces of ancient Sumer being used by the magician, who is widely known as the wisest, most powerful magician of all time, conjurer of all time and all human history on the whole planet. So the best ever, using the most powerful and dangerous entities ever. See how it doesn't really seem like something that you ought to be playing around with unless you are that guy? That's why everyone warns you away from it, or thinks or speaks about it being, it has a negative influence or can negatively influence you. Because that's what it is. That's what the Goetia is. It's that guy's very, very dangerous playbook, his cookbook, his instruction manual he made for himself to use while codifying this process for anyone who isn't highly advanced and long experienced in high Hermetic or Enochian magics, in theurgy first. To even read the Goetia is kind of like if a 6-year-old were trying to fix a tricycle wheel and someone hands them to use a manual on the control of a nuclear fusion reactor in order to accomplish that. First of all, it isn't going to make a lot of sense to the 6-year-old. Secondly, it's likely that some of that information, even though they don't know how to use it correctly, or make any interpretation of it in a meaningful way, still, some of that information, way beyond their pay grade, is going to get dangerously lodged in their head and come out in the worst way at some later time. And third, if they can at all and try to apply any of that, nuclear fusion reactor information in real time, in real life, they're going to wind up maiming and or murdering everything in a very wide radius to themselves. In terms of this example, anyway, you don't give a 5-year-old the launch codes to the Houston rocket turbines that everyone happens to be standing directly under, including that 5-year-old, when they're asking you how to fly a kite, right? Same idea. These are entities that can choose to be, at their inception, either angelic or demonic at will. And that isn't something to be messed with. So when you say join a lodge, if you're part of that sort of a formalized tradition, and your mentor says, stay away from Goetic magic, stay away from the Goetia, it's dangerous, yeah, you should listen to them. It isn't that the Goetia is good or bad, evil or divine. It's that you are the 5-year-old who hasn't learned how to fly a kite yet, and you're asking for the nuclear launch codes. Reality hacking isn't for the faint-hearted or the unready mind to begin with. Even when it's focusing on the bright and shiny side of things, these are powerful tools. Knights carry swords for a reason. There are battles to be fought. So you don't want to deep dive into the darkest recesses before you even know, how to swim, how to tread water. Goetic magic entails interacting with the most powerful influences. When you practice Enochian magics, theurgy, you begin by working for years invoking, incantating angels on purpose, by will, drawing down into yourself the most powerful divine white light source energy that you can gain access to, down into yourself. That's what you're calling on. That's what you're bringing into your own being. You're pulling down willfully and by intention all those highest, most graceful, brightest, sacred, divine influences of your own psyche and of what you have access to from source into your conscious mind, body, and self. You're working with, adding to, evolving, cultivating, growing, and mastering those traits, right? You're reaching for, hopefully finding at first just in rare glimpses, communion with your HGA, what's called the Holy Guardian Angel, which, is this other topic entirely. It doesn't necessarily mean it's purely an angel, but those powers, those aspects of yourself, you're pulling them, cultivating them into recognition and use so you can gain access to them at will. Goetic magic is the opposite of that dynamic action. It draws, rather than top down, from below up. It is, the other side of the triangle pointed down. It pulls the darkest, deepest traits upwards into ourselves, into willed recognition, cultivation, and then evolution. Think about that for a moment. Cultivating the worst aspects of your own personality, right? ultimately, the goal becomes balancing, evolving the two forces into a balanced harmony, right? So you drag the top down, you drag the bottom up, and then you're seeking harmony within the self, where all those aspects of the psyche, traits of energetic force, are evolved into a unified whole that becomes aware of what it is. But imagine calling on a demon on purpose and pulling it into your own head, giving it control, right? Playing with it on purpose, trying to work with it, cajole it, move it, get it to cooperate with you, without having a host of angels at your back first. That's a bad idea, right? That's what using the Goetia without years of experience in angelic magics is. It's calling on the darkest, deepest, possibly nastiest, worst thing you could ever possibly imagine. And it's probably worse than you could imagine. And then you're saying, hey, yeah, good, you're here. Crawl into my skull and do what you want. It's cool. Yeah, no, come on. Take over my life. Nah, I don't have a friend in the room to make sure that you don't destroy me. I'll just take a nap alone over here while you do whatever in my living room, right? I'll be on the sofa sleeping. Oh, here's a knife, by the way. I know you like those because you're out of balance and a total psychopath, right? So come sit on the bed, demon. Here's this knife while I sleep. Come sit next to me. And let's see what happens next. As above, so below. If you don't have angels there first, it's not going to end well. If the angels you work with are all that is so immaculately, incredibly, terribly, powerfully good, if they are the aspect of our own highest consciousness, if you want to think about it or give it that sort of a terminology, then what do you think their antithesis, the demons of the Goetia, are, right? Those jinn codified on purpose to be the negative influences, the 72 fractured negative influences of the psyche, because the jinn, entities, whatever you want to call them, of the Goetia, are the measured, equal, and opposite force of our highest aspirations of the 72 angelic fractures. They are, the jinn, are the roots deep, gnarled, clawing in the most recessed crannies in the dark of the tree of life. Where, say, the Enochian angelic entities are the leaves above, bright in the sunlight. So should you stay away from the Goetia for years and years in your magical practice? Yes, you absolutely should, especially given the way that this person asked this question. Remember, I want to do it more because I'm told not to. That's not a good sign. It speaks volumes to how you aren't yet ready. Most people never are ready for goetic magic. I know and respect highly advanced, experienced magical practitioners, those who have crossed many thresholds, who have never yet used goetic magic or have any intention to do so because they aren't prepared, or they know they aren't prepared yet and may never be prepared in this lifetime to do so. And they recognize that. And it isn't because goetic magic itself is somehow definable as good or bad. It's just because of what it is. A method often beyond the practitioner's abilities or control. Until next time.